The tabletop takeaway.
Game mechanics on display.
Three designers share the stage.
Pick a genre and we'll play.
The tabletop takeaway.
Welcome back to our bonus episode on tactical combat.
Yeah. So I'm Charlie McCarran,
I'm Trevor Muller-Hagel.
I'm Ananda Gunratna.
and this is the Tabletop Takeaway, where we are three game designers, and each episode we talk about a different game that we've played and how we can learn from it as designers. And in this special episode, we're going to have kind of an overview of tactical combat games and what we might do with them as designers. Now that we've got a series of 3 games we've played.
Yeah.
We played chess, Mage Wars, and
Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion.
yes. So yeah, what are you guys' thoughts on tactical combat games?
I love them.
I also like them a lot. Actually, I think they've, in some ways, they have, I don't know if I'd say negatively impacted me, but I feel like a lot of my design ideas, at least for some period of time, maybe not so much anymore, but a lot of my design ideas used to tend toward tactical combat.
Absolutely.
And it was
Same.
hard for me to envision other types of games.
What do you mean you just want to get a what? No, you want to attack something. You want to move on a grid. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so maybe I'm in the minority here that I'm not as big of a fan of tactical combat games, except when you guys mentioned that, well, chess counts. So
Yeah, that seems like the big exception for you.
yeah, and I actually really enjoy Gloomhaven, and I did enjoy playing Mage Wars, which I hadn't tried before. So
maybe he actually does like them, but he had a bad experience with some.
Yeah, maybe you haven't been playing the right ones.
I haven't been playing the right ones, I think. Because, well, from a design standpoint, something I've mentioned in these past episodes that's less appealing to me about tactical combat games is where you have a big grid and maybe one character that you're controlling
Right.
and moving around, and then you obviously have to go kill the other person or enemy or whatever it is.
Sure.
And then, so you move sort of arbitrarily to get there.
Right.
You do an attack. I'm better melee fighter, so I better get right up at them and then do some damage, and they don't die yet. And then...
Which, I mean, interesting because, as we discussed, this may be a result of poor spatial abstractions and low-impact combat actions, which are solved to some extent by mechanics in Mage Wars and chess, respectively.
I feel like this is a game design doctor session where we can take these games.
All right. Tactical games.
Yeah.
Let's figure this out.
That was probably one of our podcast name ideas at some point, but so why though is Gloomhaven more appealing to me?
Is it because it's co-op?
Is it because of the growth?
No, because actually I usually don't like co-op tactical combat games, even less than others.
But it's the meta progression then, like Trevor says?
Meta progression, I think, is part of it, and the card play to me is the fun part.
Dynamic card
It's an
play.
interesting puzzle.
Yeah, that's what it is. I think I love puzzly games, and a lot of the very thematic games, it's like they have... And maybe this is a side effect that I've played a lot of IP-based ones. Where it's like,
sure.
Well, we have these characters, so
Right.
we have to do these things with them, and the missions are going to be like this. Like Batman. Obviously you're going to go around
Gotham,
the streets of Gotham. And,
Right.
yeah.
God, I'd love to play Batman tactical combat.
Yeah, you're the target market, maybe.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. Well, what other thoughts do you guys have on the genre?
We have learned a lot.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, we talked a bit about diminishing resources, which are sort of... So like in chess, it's you lose pieces, right? And this is okay because, as we talked about, your moves are actually blocked by your own pieces. So losing pieces means you have more options for movement. Mm-hmm. It's that context changing that means that even though you have fewer resources available, the resources meaning changes later in the game. And so it's more interesting, even though you're technically getting weaker.
Right, which was true across the board, kind of, except for I would maybe say Mage Wars was not quite that way.
Yeah, in Mage Wars, you do put out resources, so you do get stronger.
You have a ramp up over this whole session.
Yeah, so that one isn't. I mean, obviously, you also lose things, but
Right, but in exchange for longer term or short term power.
right,
Right.
right. And the victory condition in Mage Wars, which is you have to get the other enemy mage to
Yeah,
zero
you take
health.
the king. Yep.
Having low health in Mage Wars doesn't impact you in any way. You can still do
Right.
the same amount. Whereas in like chess, okay, I guess technically chess the objective is to kill the king. So maybe that's not a good way of phrasing it. But yeah, okay, maybe yeah. Never mind. Scratch that.
Sure. Well, one thing we haven't talked too much about is the randomness of these games. Of like, output randomness, input randomness. We mentioned that in an episode. Output randomness being you do the action and then you randomize usually with dice.
Yep. Or
to
in
see what's going
Gloomhaven,
to
it's
happen.
cards.
Yeah, or with cards in
Yep.
Gloomhaven. You're flipping the cards. And I think a lot of people, designers, kind of frown upon like, it's like just output randomness. You're chucking dice and
Right.
Yeah.
but I will say I have learned over the especially teaching game design. There's something really magical about the output randomness, and I can watch in my room of students play testing their games, and I can instantly tell which ones are the output randomness ones because everyone is laughing or yelling.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so there's something to be said for that, I think, in these games, having that fun moment of like, okay, I'm going to try for the attack.
Yeah.
Right. Well, D&D is that at its core, right? Like you roll a D20 to attack. You roll a D20 to try something. If it's a 1, oh my God, you critically failed. You fall on your face.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Mage Wars, the way the dice feel when you roll them and then you see how much damage they do, that feels really good.
Yeah.
That works really well.
Yeah, and even Gloomhaven, even though, they're just not very exciting cards usually, it's +1, -1, +2. But every once in a while you get the ×2 to your whole attack.
Or the ×0.
Yeah, the miss. Yep. So, yeah, I think building those into your game, that's one takeaway for me of these games as a whole.
Having a measured output randomness in a way.
Actually, I was going to say even more like swingy.
Oh, more swingy.
For fun.
It's okay to be swingy.
Yeah, for the fun of it.
For the fun of it.
Yep. Especially in a game, chess has no output randomness
Or input
elements.
It's all...
Unless you count your opponent's moves, anyways, chess has the ups and downs of like, wow, you just took my piece. I wasn't even seeing that. Whereas these other ones where you're rolling dice, it's like, it's less exciting if you're knocking them down by 1 health or at a time.
True.
So maybe just make it more swingy too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. A problem that I often see is that, people have these games where it's very incremental. And we talked about a bit with, chess's insta-kill, right? Which makes every action extremely impactful versus the typical game where you're just chipping away at health. And if you're too incremental, it does make the game less interesting. It's more of a drag.
Whenever I see a +1 on a prototype card, or like, this adds 1 to my strength or something like that.
It depends what your strength is beforehand.
It does. It depends. Sometimes that can be really exciting, but
yeah.
I shy away from playing those prototypes when I see that.
I think the really big one is like percentages in video games. I mean, in video games, of course, you can do any percent you want because the computer will calculate it for you. But when I see like, 10% to this stat, I mean, sometimes that's a big deal, but it doesn't feel like a big deal at any point. Like, I don't care about a 10% buff. It's not... I'm
For
not
3 turns, great, and then it fades. Awesome.
Yeah. It's You see it everywhere though.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because it's like an easy way to tell the player, okay, we're going to reward you, but we're not actually going to reward you.
Temporary, not that
Yeah.
great, but you'll feel kind of nice for a second.
So I've been ripping on tactical combat games here, but what do you guys think though are some of the really nice features of them?
They're super interactive.
Oh yeah,
You have that
Yep.
just built in, and it's like it's the one place it's one place where you can attack other players. Like you can have sort of you can't even really call it take that,
Right.
Because they're usually 2-player, and it's just completely expected. No one feels bad about you like destroying their stuff, forcing them to skip a turn.
that's the game.
Like
Yeah.
you can literally make people skip turns in tactical. I mean, you don't want to do it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like in any other genre, I would say no, never have a skip a turn mechanic. And I mean, don't do it too much in tactical combat. But like if you stun your opponent,
Right.
that's a thing you can do, and there's not going to be that many hard feelings about it because you're fighting each other. That's what
In
are
a
you gonna do?
2-player game.
In a 2-player, yes.
two-player
So
absolutely in a
3-player
2-player
game, 4-player game.
Yes, no.
Now you feel
no.
bad.
Yeah,
Now
do not do that in a 3-player.
Now you're trailing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely. That's only something you can do in a 2-player game.
But not
That,
chess.
that does we didn't play. So the only multiplayer game we featured in this series is a co-op, Gloomhaven. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on like if you can make a tactical combat game work with multiplayer.
Yeah,
like, what
my-
are ways to do that?
Well,
like-
okay. I guess my hot take is don't play multiplayer tactical combat games unless they're co-op. But if you absolutely have to, and I assume when you say multiplayer, you're not talking about like a team
No.
game, right?
Oh, team battles are fun though too.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, team battles are fun. That's how I would play multiplayer tactical combat. I want there to always be 2 sides because I really don't like free for alls. But you could have something like attack left. So each player tries to kill the player on their left. It can be slightly awkward sometimes. I think actually Spelling Brawl did that. That was a tactical combat word search game I made. Where each player is trying to knock the player to their left out of the ring in a multiplayer game.
Oh, interesting.
And that actually
cool.
worked decently well. So I think
Everyone has a different target.
right.
Like the-
Yes.
What was that assassin game that people played on
Yeah, yeah.
campuses?
Oh,
where
yeah,
you
yeah.
have to assassinate one
Yeah.
person, they have to assassinate another person.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, attack left is nice. It can have some weird dynamics because, of course, there are times when you want to protect one of, even possibly. Well, there are times when you want to protect the player who's trying to kill you, because
So they don't. So the
'Cause-
other player doesn't win.
right, exactly. So there are some weird interactions, but overall, I prefer that to free for alls.
Yeah.
I do not think free for alls are a good idea in tactical combat.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, and I think that interaction is very interesting. Of like, oh, I need to save this person so that.
Yeah, even though they're trying to kill me.
Yep. I don't know if I mentioned it to you guys, but I just played Classic recently again, and I love the scoring mechanic of that. How you have a set number of lives, 5 lives each person, and the game ends when someone dies. And when someone dies, the person who has the most lives left wins.
Oh.
So you have like kind of organic teams forming when like everyone, say 2 of us are low on health and maybe Ananda has 5 lives left and we're like, Trevor and I are like, okay, we got to kill Ananda or
Yeah.
else, and then if there's 4 players, now suddenly the 2 people who both have 5 lives could win together if they kill one of us. So now it's 2 on
Oh.
2. So
Okay,
yeah.
that's interesting. Yeah, being able to share victory like that definitely changes the calculations there.
Yeah.
That's neat.
So, yeah, I guess let's talk about what would we do now with our knowledge of tactical combat games in our next designs.
I think so. Having tried my hand at a bunch of different tactical combat games, I think, a 1 move per turn, high impact attack game, sort of like chess. Maybe insta kill, maybe some other high impact. And I mean, Spelling Brawl was tactical combat, but in Spelling Brawl you only had one guy on the board. So saying it's one move a turn is a little misleading. Playing the Ratch's Den makes me really want to try another game where you have a lot of guys on the map, a lot of fighters, but you can only move one at a time, and each move is very highly impactful. Because I think there's a lot of potential there.
Mm-hmm.
I really kind of fell in love with Mage Wars, like spatial abstraction, the cards as units. Like, I think I've talked about it in 3 of the episodes now, and I really think it could solve a lot of problems I have with a lot of normal RPGs and things like that, where you can't track all of the things that they say is happening to the character. It's like, oh, they have bless, they have this, they have that. And it's like, well, do I write it down? Do I give myself a card? Like, and then that's in front of me and not on the board. Like, being able to put the effects on a card on the board so you see it there, all the information's present, like, that is so clean. It does make things a little muddled if you have a ton of cards out there, but, like, I don't know.
Well, that's where you have the spatial abstraction. You just have really big zones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought when Ananda whipped out the board for it, I'm like, that's huge. Like, how on earth? And it works great.
Mm-hmm.
3x4 grid, and you just have zones. But yeah, I really want to try that. Maybe I just want to play more Mage Wars too, just to get a better feel for
sure.
it.
I'm willing to play that.
Awesome. But yeah, it's a cool idea, and I think combining that with more of an RPG feel would be cool too, where you have a character card that maybe even it's a legacy kind of thing where you can mark the card and change your stats on the card, and then that's out in play, and so you have all of your stats in play, and it's just there. It's like probably make it a lot easier to approach it, and then you're not trying to look at a character sheet that's 2 pages long.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Maybe you could have like some story elements on the back side of the card.
Yeah.
I don't know, because in that kind of format with Mage Wars, it doesn't really matter what the back is necessarily.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes maybe, but yeah.
Well, and it's not like it has to be kept a secret because RPGs are played collaboratively, and so you can use both sides. You're not trying to this is part of a deck, so yeah, you just have one side be for combat, one side be for not combat, and those are the stats you need. Like that just sounds so nice. Mm-hmm. I want to try it, but we'll see what I can do.
Yeah. And I think for me, something I would like to try more, kind of inspired by chess, is this hierarchy of pieces. Like, say, bring that into a tactical combat game that's maybe like thematic, where you have maybe your big boss character that's like the queen, super powerful, but you really got to save them, and little pawns around. And because I do think that's one thing that would be cooler to see in more tactical combat games, where you get to control a lot more figures, like you were saying, Ananda. Mm-hmm. But having that disparity between, this one's just really good, and I guess there's a lot of games that do that, like the Heroescape, where you can draft
the hero versus the squad.
But but maybe more dramatically different, like how they move and interact, possibly.
Collect resources.
Yeah. And the other thing I would like to try more too is like making a co-op tactical combat game where it's not so much that players can quarterback.
Right.
Through some other like unique mechanic, maybe with hidden cards that,
Or just make it really complicated.
Right.
Yeah.
Charlie making a really complicated game. Oh no.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I don't like making complicated games, but
It works for Spirit Island.
yeah, which maybe we can talk about that soon.
Spoilers.
I don't know. Yeah.
Uh-oh. Alert.
Yeah. Cool. What other thoughts? Any final thoughts on tactical combat games?
It's hard. I've been a fan of like tactical RPGs since I'm pretty sure Final Fantasy Tactics or Tactics Ogre came out, which if anyone knows what those are, Tactics Ogre I think came out for the PS1 back 90 something 7 maybe. And I loved that game. I loved having units that could improve over time and being able to guide them on that path and growth. And I do want to see like somehow more of that in these tactical games. But I don't know how you could, like, I don't know, join the two of the tabletop world and the virtual world. I know Descent, the 3rd edition I've been playing, they have a very strong app component to it that does percentage calculations. And so, like, you could have a sword that does 15% chance to cause infect, but it just handles it in the background and just say, I attack with my sword. Like, great, you did it. It's infected. Oh, cool, great. But yeah, I don't know. I really like that world, and I really want to see some of that come in, but not to the point of it being too much work on the player's part either. Because that's the challenging part.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh yeah. Well, it's making me think of Kingdom Death Monster.
Oh my goodness.
Oh man.
Which is, I would say, one of my least favorite tactical combat games.
Ananda gave it thumbs down just now, just so you all know.
I wanted to like the game because I like the theme of you're upgrading your character with all these things, and it's really brutally like you see how far you can get, and you'll die and have to restart. But there's a complicated game that's on the AI side. Like every single AI card you draw takes about 5 minutes to process what's on, how you handle this beast.
A little. And for some players, it's great. You know, and like that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that kind of challenging, diverse AI that can be really dynamic.
And I think it goes into something else I wanted to bring up of proficiency in a game.
Oh yes,
it's like a lot of people play these kind of games to get better and better. Like I'm obsessed with playing chess because I want to keep improving my score.
Right.
And
I think that's a big reason of why people play games in general. Feeling better feels really good.
Yeah.
Or getting better feels really good.
That's true.
Well,
of any genre, though, I feel like this...
Many genres. I mean, there are maybe a couple exceptions, but in general, the pursuit of mastery is a big part of why people love games. Above other art forms.
Well, especially like when we're looking back to 80s, 90s with, not being able to save your game for one. You have to master every level of the game in order to not die, in order to get to the end. Looking at you, Lion King, which I beat apparently as a 10-year-old or a 9-year-old, and I don't know how I did it.
Wow.
But it's a fascinating thing. And then now we have these games that kind of give you the feeling of mastery. I'm looking at the video game specifically because that's what I'm thinking of. They give you that feeling of mastery because your character can do really cool things.
Oh, they cheat now.
But you don't have to be good at it to make your character look like they're doing really cool stuff.
Well, I mean, this is a very clever thing actually that they do in a lot of video games nowadays. For more reasons, I'm sure, than just the pursuit of mastery, but it's especially common in the roguelite genre.
Sure.
Roguelite games being a lot like roguelike games, but you also unlock things between runs.
Right.
So like, you do a run, and then you get some sort of currency that you spend on upgrading your character. So now your character's just objectively stronger.
Right.
You're not more skilled as a player. I mean, maybe you're more skilled as a player, but your character's better able to handle the challenges, and you keep doing that until you eventually beat the game because you've unlocked so many upgrades that
you could still be bad at it and you could still win.
Right, which guarantees progression even if the player's not learning that much. But I think more importantly, the cool thing about that is that it means the game is to some extent auto-balancing, especially when you add in features that make it more difficult.
Sure.
Like Slay the Spire, for example, introduced the whole idea. Well, maybe I don't know if it introduced it, but that's the one I associate most with Ascension mechanics.
Oh, sure.
Where you beat the game on Ascension level, 4 or whatever, and then you unlock 5. And so you automatically ratchet up to 5, which makes it more difficult. Now, Slay the Spire is roguelike in the sense that you don't get permanent upgrades between runs.
Right.
But like if you look at, for example, the last spell has both roguelite upgrades between runs and also ascension mechanics where when you beat it on one difficulty, now you can challenge it on a higher difficulty. And because you have these two things, the game automatically balances its difficulty to the player because you can play a bunch of times and unlock bonuses that make you stronger. And then you can also beat the game a bunch of times and unlock new ascension levels that make it harder. And so players will arrive at different levels, depending on their skill level. But the sort of back and forth between these two counterbalancing forces means that the game will ultimately be balanced just right for the player, and the devs don't need to even spend that. I mean, I'm sure they spend plenty of time on balance, but they don't need to balance it perfectly. It just balances itself, which is pretty cool.
That's nice.
If only we could do board games that way. Man.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
actually,
Gloomhaven is like that. It's kind of like...
Oh, that's true.
You beat a thing and you unlock new items that'll help you with the harder levels that are coming up.
And then if you fail the level, you don't necessarily discard everything from that level.
Yep. You'll play the same level with new knowledge and items. Yeah. Yeah. It's good. Important in a game that's not against another human.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. It's especially important in solo games.
Mm-hmm. Well, with that, I think that would wrap up our episode here in our series on tactical combat games. Thanks for listening if you've been with us this whole time, and looking forward to
the future.
The future. Yeah.
Bum, bum, bum.
Hey, thanks for listening to The Tabletop Takeaway. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. So please tell your friends and visit our website at thetabletoptakeaway.com, where you can suggest games and mechanics for us to cover next on the show.